Newsfirst, face to face with Shalan Benedict.
Hello there, very good evening. Welcome to another edition of Face to Face. We've kept you abreast of Sri Lanka's political developments, and we have been successful in, of course, getting government representatives on this program on several occasions just to appraise you of what is really happening in Sri Lanka, given the fact that this is a new normal or a new normal for Sri Lanka, given that we suffered through COVID-19 pandemic and now an economic crisis. We're trying to get things back, but this year is slated to be a turbulent one because it is an election year. Joining us this evening is none other than the Minister of Justice himself, Dr. Wijeyadasa Rajapakshe. A very good evening, Mr. Rajapakshe, and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
So, to start off, first things first, the online security bill was passed in Parliament. However, that was tabled to the Cabinet by the Public Security Minister. And, of course, there are controversies surrounding as to whether or not this bill can actually be made into law, given the irregularities that took place in Parliament. Yesterday, President's Counsel M.A. Sumantiran highlighted the fact that 13 amendments that were proposed by the Supreme Court to make this bill in line with the Constitution have been disregarded. Now, as to whether or not that statement is true is a different matter entirely. My question to you is, if there has been some sort of discrepancy like that, will this online safety bill, now passed in Parliament, convert itself into law?
In the first place, that I must say, although that he makes that allegation of discrepancies, he has not clearly pointed out exactly what are those discrepancies in the first place. The secondly, that there had been some discrepancies which were, that manifestly seen in the earlier bill when it was passed in the Parliament regarding the amendments to the Provincial Council election law.
Okay.
In fact, that Mr. Sumantiran himself was instrumental in doing most of those changes, which went outside the scope of the determination of the Supreme Court, and that was passed in the Parliament. Therefore, what happened was that the whole election system of the Provincial Council got crippled as a result of that amendment. Then we went to the Supreme Court asking for the election. The Supreme Court decided that either under the previous law, old law, even under the existing law, you can't go for the election. That is how that we got stalled. You may recall even at that time, on the basis that there had been some deviation from the determination of the Supreme Court, former Chief Justice Mr. Sarath de Silva went to court and argued that this Parliament has exceeded its powers and therefore to annul or to amend that particular piece of legislation, where the Supreme Court held that the Supreme Court lacks jurisdiction after its determination. Of course, that if there are certain issues that there had been some discrepancies or maybe something unconstitutional, much beyond that, assuming that there had been some unreasonable laws, but still that we have the power that we can discuss all those matters and bring some amendment. Except for, that invoking that powers for amendment, there is no other remedy.
So Parliament itself, or the governing faction that has a majority in Parliament itself, must understand and realize that these are outside the scope of the Supreme Court's determination and bring in amendments subsequently.
Yeah, not because of this, not only on that discrepancies, even otherwise, that we have studied the laws relating to this online safety in several countries, but that for each country the law differs from the other. Certainly that if there are certain things, alarming matters, that's we will go through, and we are open. Of course, that was handled by the Minister of Public Security. And most of the people are making sweeping allegations saying that it's just to,
suppress freedom of expression.
But on the other hand, they also should be mindful of the fact that the last year there had been 5,000 complaints received by the Public Security Ministry Police regarding the abuse and misuse of this social media, the freedom. And
so when you say 5,000 complaints, 5,000 complaints like, publishing of, nudity and other explicit material online.
Explicit, then extortion, then...
So for extortion, there are already laws in Sri Lanka for extortion. Just because it happens on an online platform does not preclude it from the existing laws of extortion and theft and all of those other provisions that we have in Sri Lanka's law. And as for obscenity, there is, of course, the Obscene Publications Ordinance. And that law applies, as far as my knowledge goes. So why the requirement for new laws?
When those laws were, enacted during the colonial period, we didn't have this kind of technology. And there was no law even in any other part of the world just to control this kind of the media. But
so this act was passed to control media.
No, not
social
to media, not really to control the media, to control the abuses, abuses and crime, basically crimes. That by making use of this media freedom, that nobody is empowered to commit crimes.
Nobody is empowered to commit crimes. When you say crimes, what do you mean?
The crimes mean that there are definitions in the law. Then one is that publication or the nudity or the personal things which could harm, which could be harmful to other person.
Okay.
Then that there had been so many extortion. Then there had been even some death had been reported as a result of certain publications, unwarranted publication. And that is why the police has already got 5,000 complaints in the course of the last year alone.
I think really the issue here is that making statements that will move on to some other pieces of legislation also as we go on. But just one final question regarding the online safety bill. The Minister of Public Security himself said that there are some issues in this law and that we will bring in amendments in the future. So do you think that this piece of legislation was so vital, so important, that it had to be passed now in whatever imperfect stage that it is in, or imperfect state that it is in, by the admission of the Minister of Public Security himself, and for amendments to be brought in thereafter?
No, that you cannot find a perfect law anywhere in the world. Even the constitution of each and every country, that they have been subject to amendments that varies, depending on the demands or the requirements for the time being that you will have to do it. If you look at although that there are a lot of criticism even by some other countries, that in 100 countries all over the world that these laws are there. But they varies from the country to country, but that they have enacted, even USA, even UK, even the Singapore that there are that 17 media organizations were involved in this social media. They are operating from this region and stationed in Singapore. But the Singapore also, they are having that.
But Mr. Rajapaksa, I think what we're missing here is it's not just the piece of legislation that is at issue here. It's the implementation of that piece of legislation. Who is implementing it? How are they implementing it? We've seen time and time again when racist statements are being made, when statements that stir communal violence are being made, when statements that were made stirred communal violence and caused death, damage and much distress across Sri Lanka, none of these pieces of legislations that are meant to address those issues were used. I do not want to specifically mention the incidents because, of course, those are well, it might even go on to stir more issues. But there were instances like this, and laws like the PTA and the ICCPR Act, they're all being used very selectively. So as much as someone could come to maybe some sort of consensus that, okay, maybe other countries have this law, so let's have these kind of laws as well. But the general public does not trust the government, does not trust the officials who are entrusted with using these powers under these acts in the right way.
That the people did not have much faith in the governmental system.
Exactly.
That we know.
They don't have. I think
that is why there are a lot of that is why there are a lot of changes.
Okay.
That is that is why we had to come forward, because I was not a part of that that executive until that change took place in May 2022.
But you did contest under the SLPP ticket.
Yes, certainly. I contested in Colombo. Early I contested from United National Party. Then thereafter, after I contested 2 elections. The third election, even before that, I was from the national list. My 4th term that I contested in the same district from SLPP, and my identity was quite different. Even my vote base had been increased by 50%.
Yes, but my question to you is, can you really, wash your hands and claim to be holier than thou at a time when you had worked to ensure victory to President Gotabaya Rajapakse? You had ensured the general public that this president will lead Sri Lanka into the next, age, to a developed country. When you had done all that and the people believed in you and voted for him, then can you come now and say, well, I wasn't a part of the executive at that time, so, I'm really not responsible?
Not only that, I was not only in the executive, in fact, that most of the decisions that were taken by Gotabaya Rajapakse was challenged by me.
Okay.
And I advised him not to get involved, not to take that kind of, adverse decision to the country. Even some of the decisions that, although I was a member of the parliament, that I went and challenged in the Supreme Court. Even when he introduced this Colombo Port City Bill, I went and argued in the Supreme Court for each and everything, irrespective of the fact that I had been elected from the same party. Each and every wrong decision that were taken by Gotabaya Rajapakse, that I condemn. Sometimes I challenge, even with regard to the appointment of his secretary, P. Wijeyasundara, and Niwat Cabral as the governor of the central bank. Everything that we warn him, and publicly we condemn.
So moving on, of course, it's important to have policy consistency. Now, you said that there is no perfect pieces of law, and sometimes, amendments need to be made. Very true. Let's speak a bit about the Prevention of Terrorism Act. It's been there for the longest time, and the general public have been against this piece of legislation purely on the fact that it is not being used to suppress any form of terrorism or prevent any form of terrorism, because to my knowledge, and I believe to the knowledge of the general public as well, there has never been an instance where any form of terrorist activity has been successfully prevented from this piece of legislation. But there are more than enough examples of this piece of legislation being used to simply exact revenge from social activists and people who are voicing their opinions against the government. The best example, the very best example, being the arrest of Vasanta Mudalige, the president of the Inter-University Students, or the convener of the Inter-University Students Federation. Whichever authority decided to, thought it right to brand him as a terrorist. And when the 2019 Easter Sunday attacks came, there were enough of warnings, and nobody really thought about using the PTA. So on the PTA, now there is a bill that has been gazetted. It has been challenged in the Supreme Court. And now, as we saw with the online safety bill, just because the Supreme Court gives the Parliament a determination saying that these clauses are not in line with the Constitution and you must make these changes to make them in line with the Constitution, the Parliament can simply disregard that by way of oversight, or that could be intentional oversight or maybe negligent oversight, mistakeful oversight, but that is not an assurance that whatever piece of legislation that is being passed is in line with the Constitution. So how do we move forward?
That has never happened in any of the bills that I have presented to the Parliament.
That you have personally presented? Okay.
Commencing from the 19th Amendment.
So then
the 21st Amendment.
Okay.
Then there were so many other bills which were challenged in the Supreme Court. Recently they challenged the hydrographic bill was challenged. And there were many bills that they challenged. Contempt of court Act was challenged.
I'm speaking about after the Supreme Court determination comes into Parliament, because now that seems to be the case concerning the online safety bill, online security bill, because we saw how this bill was passed in Parliament, where people were...
I will tell you the core issue that you raised about the PTA.
Okay.
The Prevention of Terrorism Act, that was a temporary provision act enacted just before the war. Now one cannot say that had never been used for any meaningful purposes.
Maybe during the war?
If not for that one, that maybe sometimes that war is either still continuing or that's millions of
Okay,
people have been killed.
let me qualify that statement.
Yeah.
After 2009, after the end of the civil war, I do not know of any instance where the PTA has been used for meaningful prevention of terrorism, which is what it's for.
Right. Then that is, not the media. Really, that's we who told that. After the conclusion of the war, this must be changed.
So why hasn't it been changed then?
Yes, I will tell you that exactly what happened. When I became the Minister of Justice in 2015, we started the drafting of a new law. That is the counter-terrorism law.
Okay.
And the other one was anti-corruption law.
Okay.
Then both these bills, took about 3 to 4 years for the drafting, that there are so many agencies involved. Then, of course, in 2019, before that, in 2018, this bill was presented to the Parliament. That was challenged in the Supreme Court. Then the Supreme Court made a determination. It was about to be passed. By the time, of course, I was not in the government. As you know, that I have been sacked from the cabinet in August 2017 on this Hambantota.
Over the avant-garde incident?
No, nothing. That is about Hambantota port issue. I opposed to the cabinet in the avant-garde that they prosecuted. That is a 3 judges bench had made the determination. There was no issue. Then, of course, when I opposed to that Hambantota transaction that's been given to Chinese government company, only that I was sacked.
Okay.
But still that this law, that's the process continued. Then they went to the Supreme Court. After it was presentation, all of a sudden this Easter Sunday attack took place. Then the government, they had to make use that PTA. Only under that they had to act upon at that time.
But that wasn't used to really prevent a terrorism attack. It was just a response. I mean, let's for example imagine that there wasn't a Prevention of Terrorism Act available in Sri Lanka. Of course, there is Article 150, the Public Securities Ordinance, where the President can draft emergency regulations, and the President can draft whatever emergency regulations he wants, and he can do that on his own volition, pass it in Parliament a month later.
Anyway, at that time, the President and the Prime Minister, the government, they had made use that...
they had made use of the PTA.
The PTA.
I understand that,
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, I think even the short title of the act clearly states it's not post-terrorism, remedial act. It's called the Prevention of Terrorism Act. So
I think that there is a misunderstanding about the law. All the laws have been introduced to prevent. Even that is an offence. Killing of a murder is an offence in the penal code.
Yes, I understand that.
That is everything is to prevent. But what happens?
What's the point?
How can you prevent by the law? By the law you can prevent.
But what's the point in having, like, okay, let's say for example...
if you take that argument that each and every piece of legislation where certain things have been, made a crime is useless.
let's go on the line. Let's go on.
That is why you impose that you make it an offence and you impose punishment.
But the Prevention of Terrorism Act has provisions to detain.
Yeah, that is what I go to. That is what
so those provisions, not the entire act, those provisions are meant to prevent terrorist attacks, to maybe even get details from terrorists regarding possible terrorist attack and protect the general public.
Yes.
But if that act is not being used for that, then what is it being used for?
That had been each and every, even if all the offences in the penal code is to prevent. But how to prevent it? By the law.
But okay, let's take...
when something happened, if the law had been, that's violated, then of course that you will have to prosecute.
I think we're taking a very technical tangent to this entire issue.
I will just explain, because that PTA, it is very important as you raise. Now, there were 3 main areas where there had been a lot of criticism about the personal right, freedom of the people because of the provisions.
Yes.
The number one was in the PTA existing law, unlike in the ordinary law, evidence law, a person who has made a confession.
Yes, to a police officer.
To a police officer, that person, that's sufficient evidence.
Yes.
It's a valid evidence, admissible evidence to convict him. That was number one. Now, in the present bill, we have removed that one. We have made it that just to follow the normal law of evidence.
Okay.
Then, secondly, the detention. When it comes to the detention, the first thing, the power vested in the Minister of Defence. And originally 3 months, and it varied from time to time.
But
anyway,
it has been
a longer
extended to
period.
DIGs now, the power of detention.
Yes, I will explain.
Okay.
Then there were a lot of criticism that it should not be, the such powers should not be given to the Minister of Defence.
The executive.
Executive, and also anyway, secretary also executive.
But a political.
But it's a political arm. Now therefore, that when earlier bill, when we suggested that powers to be given to the senior DIGs, then there were criticism. Now that power has been given to, we have proposed to be given to the Secretary to the Defence. There that he has to be convinced with the materials provided by the IGP to issue a detention order not exceeding 1 month, but at the same time simultaneously he has to inform the magistrate and also the Human Rights Commission. If he wants that order to be, the detention to be extended beyond 1 month, that can be done only with the sanction or the approval of the magistrate. And that has come under the judicial supervision. Number 3, the other issue was the absence of a definition.
Yes.
Absence of a definition.
Or at least giving a broad definition to terrorism.
Broad definition. Now that we have addressed that issue, that there had been many changes that we did. In fact, earlier
this was subsequent to gazetting the bill? Or?
No, what happened was that I gazetted the bill, my recollection is somewhere in March. Then still that people made a lot of representations, that I had a lot of discussion with even that our diplomats. Then they pointed out that they need, certain provisions have to be, the recast, that is to be addressed. Then I was so flexible, I withdrew that one.
Okay.
I withdrew that one. I allowed any person who is willing to make any contribution to enhance the standards of the law. Then we went for series of dialogues for more than 5 to 6 months. Finally, I invited the people through the media for any person to come and make their representations. Then I allocated 3 days. Then I gave a hearing to them. I discussed it. Then I had a series of discussions, round of discussions with the diplomat communities also. Then after that, what I have inserted in the present existing bill is the one almost all the people had agreed.
But again,
nobody says that you need not have a law to prevent terrorism. Everybody says we need. Then the only criterion, whatever the country, whoever the expert who is going to make the law, what is the criterion?
What is the criterion?
The criterion is, on the one hand, the state must take the responsibility of safeguarding the lives of the people and the properties and the sovereignty of the country. On the other hand, that you must make every possible measures to prevent that the law is not being abused or misused to restrict the freedom of the people, liberty of the people.
So what are the provisions?
That is the scale where that you will have to weigh.
So my question, what are the provisions in the Anti-Terrorism Act that prevents the misuse of the act? Now, we've seen how the PTA has been misused. We've seen how police officers misuse the PTA. We've seen how politicians use the PTA to arrest and detain those who are against their political views. So what has the ATA proposed or brought forward to address these issues that we see every day?
Yes, that we have fully addressed on all those issues. First thing, that we have given a definition what the terrorist acts are.
But it's a very broad definition. If you stop the government or any foreign government from doing anything, that can be branded as terrorism. So
that is that if you ask from 10 people what is the necessary, that's the definition for terrorism. Terrorism, they will give 10 different ways.
I think with the definition that has been given in the ATA, they could give 1,000 definitions.
That's right.
Because it is so broad. But is that correct?
No.
Shouldn't the law be certain?
It is completely wrong.
Shouldn't the law be certain? Because I personally know there have been so many people calling me and trying to check up on what really are offences under the online safety bill and under the anti-terrorism act.
We'll talk about the anti-terrorism act.
So people don't know, Mr. Rajapaksa. People don't know what the offences are. So how can they not do it?
The people, nobody can say people don't know.
No, you can't say that before the law.
No, we published the law, and we allowed anybody who is interested of making representations or making changes. Then they made their representation. Then thereafter, we withdrew the bill, one bill. Again, we gave you the second chance.
I understand, but the issue is the definition is so broad.
Definition that you will have to, when you say one thing, there is no unified definition for terrorism in any of the international laws.
I understand, but when you say that
But
if a person
I will just tell you example that you cannot make that allegation that the definition is so broad for the reason, if you look at the definition in our law and if you compare with the definition in the United Kingdom, our law is much narrowed down. In addition to what we say that these are the acts of terrorism, the same thing is there in the United Kingdom law. In addition to that, the United Kingdom law is very vast, very broad. It says any offence had been committed organized manner. If it's an organized crime, even it may be a rape, it may be a murder, it may be a theft. If it is an organized thing, pre-planned thing, then it comes within the terrorism. But that we have not included that kind of broad definition to our law. But now it is open. Now there are 29 petitioners that who are challenging. We welcome that. We are very happy because when we make the laws, that is why that constitution has given a very good system that legislators can make mistakes. With regard to the constitutionality, we may not be perfect. Even the Attorney General may not be perfect or the legal draftman.
The Supreme Court has the sole authority to interpret.
Sole authority is given to the Supreme Court.
But then again, even if the Supreme Court gives a determination, there is no guarantee.
There is 100% guarantee.
There is a guarantee, but then what happened to the OSB?
OSB only an allegation. We'll go through that one. Now that they were making allegations.
So you will take this up in Parliament, in the Cabinet, and will look into this matter if there have been any discrepancies.
You know that this is the problem, that some people think that we are making the laws for the survival of the government. I want to protect the government. I want to protect the president.
I don't think some people, I think many people maybe even.
No, that's I have got passed, enacted under my ministry over around 34, 35 laws.
Pieces of legislation, yes.
Legislation during
many
last
amendments to the Civil Procedure Code as well.
Well, that's during last 15 months period.
Okay.
Can you just show that any of those bills or any of the provisions in a bill that I have introduced for the purpose of the protection of the government or the president, that is for the protection of the people and the state. And therefore that we are not, that's that much of narrow-minded people when we are making law. I am not, that's just trying to have an experience in the legal field.
But Mr. Rajapakse, we're at the final few minutes of the show, but one of the main reasons why the general public really thinks that these pieces of legislation are passed for, the furtherance of personal agendas is simply because parliamentarians have no stable policy. They don't have, one path that they really want to go on, and they don't make it clear. For example, I'm not raising an allegation, but this is just constructive discussion. You yourself voted in favor of the 19th Amendment that significantly reduced the powers of the executive president and barred dual citizens.
I am the one who introduced it.
Exactly. And barred dual citizens from coming into Parliament.
Correct.
Then you yourself also again voted for the 20th Amendment to the Constitution that significantly enhanced the powers of the president and allowed dual citizens to come back into Parliament. Then again, you yourself voted for the 21st Amendment to the Constitution that reversed some of those.
I introduced that also.
So where is the consistency, Mr. Rajapakse?
That is, there are certain things where that I know that you are a veteran journalist, but you cannot understand certain areas of politics.
So no, your assertion was...
I will explain.
You have only a few minutes, Mr. Rajapakse, because we're out of time.
The 19th Amendment, that's how much of the improvements with regard to the democracy is concerned, rule of law concerned.
Agreed.
Then when 20th Amendment was brought in, that we opposed in every sense. But in fact that I was to vote against it, but finally I realized that there were, it was a two-pronged weapon. one thing that if I oppose to it, if I voted against it, will it be defeated? It won't happen because that some Muslim MPs came and the government had only 148 to 49 and then they filled the gap. Whether I
Voted
or not, the bill will be passed.
Okay.
The secondly, that is of course from the beginning I had some misunderstanding and fight with the then president and the government and the party. Now, if I voted against that one, that they were ready within 24 hours to, take legal action against me, disciplinary action, then I should have been evicted from the parliament. That is the law. Then I thought that just if I, for the time being, if I just surrender them for a limited period, as I determined, I surrendered by voting it. I safeguarded my seat in the parliament. But as I determined, although I was not shouting to everybody, within 1 year, I was able to reverse the whole thing and to chase out all that dual citizens from parliament. That is why I did that one, not by anybody else.
So it's quite a story, Mr. Rajapakse. I believe the first time you revealed it to the general public was on Face to Face. You heard it here first.
It was very open, and that first time, in fact, that.
Thank you very much,
I have nothing to hide in
Dr.
politics.
Wijeyadasa Rajapakshe. Of course, now since you're the Minister of Justice, maybe at least in whatever period that you have left in Parliament, you could look at even addressing these matters, because if a parliamentarian can't
we are quite open.
We are not that adamant.
We are not that adamant.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wijeyadasa Rajapakshe, for joining us on our program. We've run a little bit over time, but worth it. Thank you very much once again for taking time off a busy schedule. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning in to another episode of Face to Face. Until we meet again, take care and God bless.